We have Democrats who want illegal aliens to vote. We have Democrats who want illegal aliens to have the formal California health care plan. We have Democrats who want to give out driver's licenses to illegal aliens. In other words, dumb down the notion of citizenship, eliminate the idea of an illegal alien, and completely and utterly change the United States.
This is where freedom rings.
If you believe in America, if you believe in the Constitution empowers us. It's a new day. America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, Levin TV.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Levin TV. Welcome back. Let's jump right in. Project Veritas, to me, is a very essential, real journalism organization. Remember how the old 60 Minutes used to conduct itself? They go around to these different events and or these different places. They go to a gas station where a guy kept screwing around with the numbers and everything, and they always had like secret cameras in their briefcases or in their lapels. You know, they thought they were Mission Impossible or 007 or something. And people liked it. And 60 Minutes was the #1 show forever. It may still be, as far as I know. I don't watch it anymore. So Project Veritas doesn't do what 60 Minutes does, but does it in their own way. And so they have these cameras and they get witnesses and they raise issues too. So the left hates their guts because they do it from an honest perspective. They're not pushing some radical left agenda. They're litigating against the New York Times over libel. The New York Times was running stories that were leaked to the New York Times by the FBI after the FBI, in my view, illegally seized James O'Keefe's phone. They sent a SWAT team to his house. The pretext being that one of Joe Biden's daughter, maybe he has more than one, but anyway, Joe Biden's daughter, that her diary went missing and wound up with Project Veritas, and Project Veritas offered it to the police. And that's the reason why you send a SWAT team to James O'Keefe's house to do a search. You get a search warrant from a real judge. What kind of judge is this? And of course, most of the media could care less because they don't view anything but their own bunch of circle schmucks as real journalists. It's like what they're trying to do to Hannity. There was some piece in the Washington Post. This is all being leaked, creating a whole narrative by this committee, this January 6th committee, of texts that Sean had with Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff to Trump, where it shows that he's giving advice for the president, you know, to stand down and to do other things. And this shows how Fox collaborates with Trump. They had others from Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Kilmeade, and they spoke to staffers who also said that Mark Levin and Maria Bartiromo are known to advise the president too. Now, this is very weird. What does this have to do with January 6th or protecting the building or any of the other sorts of things? And of course, I was not regularly on the phone with the president. If the president called me, he called me. If I called him, I called him. It would depend. But the idea, here's the big lie. The Washington Post knows full well, like all the other major media in this country, all the other corporate media, they are constantly in touch with politicians. They are constantly getting advice and giving advice. Look at the whole Russia collusion thing. They were partnered up, aiding and abetting the FBI and Hillary Clinton's campaign and all these other people. How do you think they get anonymous sources and leaks? Wouldn't you love to have their text messages and emails and so forth? All right, I'm going far afield, but as to quote the late, great Psaki, I'm circling back. So I'm going to circle back, and let's take a look at this. Project Veritas, military documents about gain of function contradict Fauci testimony under oath. And I am proud that we were the ones that helped break this with the former senior editor of the science page of the New York Times. And he doesn't get the credit he deserves. And he was very, very good, and he had written this long piece, and he was the one that first kind of implicated Fauci and those folks. And he did it very reluctantly, I might add. All right, let's take a listen. Go.
Project Veritas has obtained never-before-seen military documents regarding the origins of COVID-19, gain-of-function research, vaccines, potential treatments which have been suppressed, and the government's effort to conceal all of this. Dr. Anthony Fauci has testified many times before Congress stating that the U.S. government was never involved in gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology.
Will you today finally take some responsibility for funding gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator, with all due respect, I disagree with so many of the things that you've said. First of all, gain-of-function is a very nebulous term.
But the thing is you're still unwilling to admit that they gained in function when they say they became sicker. They gained in lethality. It's a new virus. That's not gain of function?
According to the definition that is currently operable.
We're not going to get anywhere close to trying to prevent another lab leak of this dangerous sort of experiment. You won't admit that it's dangerous, and for that lack of judgment, I think it's time that you resign.
You have said that I am unwilling to take any responsibility for the current pandemic. I have no responsibility for the current pandemic.
That assertion is based on the NIH's definition of gain of function. However, the documents we've obtained refute that. The documents in question stem from a report at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, better known as DARPA, which were hidden in a top-secret share drive. But what is DARPA? They are an agency under the U.S. Department of Defense, which facilitates research and technology with potential military applications. Dr. Stephen Walker was the director of DARPA at the time of the EcoHealth Alliance proposal. A source sent us this video of Dr. Walker talking about research they were exploring related to mRNA technology and its potential application with military personnel in the field.
DARPA, about 5 or 6 years ago, we stood up an office called the Biotechnology Office, and the real purpose of that was to understand how biology worked and then build, design, build, and test cycles where you could engineer microorganisms to do things that you want to do.
Though the main report regarding the EcoHealth Alliance proposal leaked on the internet a couple of months ago, it has remained unverified until now. Project Veritas has obtained a separate report to the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, written by the U.S. Marine Corps Major Joseph Murphy, a former DARPA fellow. Major Murphy makes claims in his report to the Inspector General that, if true, could be damning to the official narrative that has been played out to the world over the past 2 years. Major Murphy's report states that EcoHealth Alliance approached DARPA in March 2018, seeking funding to conduct gain-of-function research of bat-borne coronaviruses. The proposal was named Project Diffuse. DARPA rejected the proposal because the work was too dangerous and could violate the gain-of-function moratorium, despite EcoHealth's position that it would not. According to the documents, the NIAID, under the direction of Dr. Fauci, did not reject the proposal. They went ahead with the research at Wuhan and several sites across the U.S. Dr. Fauci has repeatedly maintained his position, under oath, that the NIH and NIAID have not been involved in gain-of-function research with the EcoHealth Alliance program. This appears to be contradictory to Major Murphy's analysis and the rejection from the Biological Technologies Office at DARPA. Major Murphy's report goes on to detail great concern over the COVID-19 gain-of-function program, the concealment of documents, the suppression of potential curatives like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and the mRNA vaccines. To be clear, Major Murphy is not the source of our reporting. As far as we're aware, he has done nothing that violates his oath of service to our country. We were able to track him down, and though he couldn't go into detail about the hidden documents, he did offer this heartfelt statement.
I offer no comment on the investigation or internal Marine Corps deliberations. I offer a brief comment to those that desire answers and to those that withhold them. To those seeking answers, I offer encouragement. There are good people striving for the truth, working together in and out of government, and they succeed. To those that withhold, I pray for you. Find the moral courage to come forward. Don't let a lie be our legacy to posterity. People will forgive. A commitment to truth is in the heart of this nation. Semper Fi.
Project Veritas reached out to DARPA for comment regarding the hidden documents and spoke with the Chief of Communications, Jared Adams.
Doesn't sound normal to me. No, like I said, if something resides in a classified setting, then it should be appropriately marked. I'm not at all familiar with unmarked documents that reside in a classified space. No, that, like I said, that doesn't sound like. I mean, it's not good practice to put unmarked materials in, in a classified space. But there may be cause to, because something is determined to be classified, but it wasn't originally marked appropriately. I'd be happy, Robert, honestly, to investigate and talk to the people who would own this document within the agency, ideally the director of our biological technologies office or the deputy director of that office, and try to ascertain why it was the case.
So here's the question. If the Department of Defense, the same people who make our nuclear arsenal, felt this research was too dangerous to proceed with, why in the world did the NIH, NIAID, and EcoHealth Alliance recklessly disregard the risks involved? Did they purposefully change the definition of gain of function in order to bypass the moratorium? Further, who at DARPA made the decision to bury the original report that could have raised red flags to the Pentagon, the White House, or Congress, which may have prevented this entire pandemic that has led to the deaths of 5.4 million people worldwide and caused much pain and suffering to many millions more?
Very, very interesting. There's really no information that comes out that helps Fauci. He gets into these semantic debates. Well, that's not what we really mean by gain of function. And by the way, as Mr. Executive Producer reminds me, the name of the gentleman who used to be the senior editor of the science section of the New York Times was Nicholas Wade. And you can Google his name. He was the gentleman that wrote quite an extensive piece, at least at the time it was certainly considered definitive, I think it is, suggesting that that this leak did come out of the lab, that there was no evidence whatsoever that it was monkey to human or some kind of mammal to human at all, and also the gain of function, where he points to the grant in this organization that got the grant and how the organization was trying to effect the narrative and public communications. So that gentleman deserves all the credit in the world. He gets none. I don't know why. His name is Nicholas Wade, retired from the New York Times, senior science editor from there. So he knew somewhat of what he was talking about, I would argue. And we'll only get to the bottom of this when and if the Republicans take over the House and or the Senate and start holding serious hearings. Nothing has been seriously done. And by the way, as a footnote on that subject, you read a lot. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday roll around, and you really want to get in a lot, so that's me today. I'm talking about gerrymandering on my various platforms, that the gerrymandering of congressional seats is going the way of the Democrats. And so far, they've already picked up 6 seats by their gerrymandering, even though blue states are losing population and red states are picking up congressional seats. And in the state of Florida today, the Republican legislature is nothing like the Republican governor, really. The Republican legislature is narrowed in on 2 possible new maps, neither of which really do the Republicans a whole lot of good. So you have New York, where they're wiping out 1 or 2 Republican seats. You have Maryland, where they want to wipe out the final Republican seat. You have Pennsylvania, where they're trying to wipe out 2 Republican seats, and so forth and so on. New Mexico, where they're trying to eliminate the Republican seat. And then you have in Florida, where we need to pick up ground, surrender. So this is really, this is why you'll see people, Republicans will come on TV, like this guy Michael Rounds from South Dakota. What the hell has this guy ever done, this senator? But he opens his mouth about the past election. He is concluded through his own vast research that there was no fraud. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you may not think the past election would have resulted in a different outcome, but no fraud? Are you out of your mind? Have we ever had a presidential election, certainly in modern times, with no fraud? No fraud at all? Now, we know that's a lie. We know what they found in Texas. And then a conga line forms behind this guy with Romney and others. It's really quite pathetic. Really quite pathetic. The Democrats, they try and oust a sitting president who legitimately wins in 2016 and they try and push Trump out or destroy his presidency. And of course, Romney voted for one of the counts on impeachment, you might recall. But there are many, many questions being asked by a lot of people, like by state legislatures. These state legislatures aren't a bunch of throwbacks. These are serious delegates and serious state senators who want to get to the bottom of this. Wisconsin is still pursuing it. A judge told them they could go ahead. The Secretary of State of Georgia, who's been very hostile to President Trump, they think they found voter harvesting after the fact, so now he's looking into that. They think up to 12,000 people voted in Texas who were foreigners. Now they're looking into that. Now, Nancy Pelosi, she was always concerned about absentee ballots and purging voting rolls until she became the speaker, with her fangs growing and her fingernails and her, She, back in 2005, had a totally different view of this. It's not that long ago, just 17 years ago. But George W. Bush was president, and of course, this irked her to no end. She's just a hack. She's just a political thug. That's all she is. She doesn't have a principled bone in her body. Power, power, power. That's all she cares about. And her city, well, it's going to hell. Their schools stink. The law enforcement is undermined. It's not a safe city, not even on Union Square anymore. You have drug addicts all over the place. You got human feces all over the place. You can't even walk your kids, your family through the center of the city anymore. I know. My wife and I were there a couple of months ago. It was terrible. A beautiful city like San Francisco. And it's not the only one. That's what she wants to do to America. Let's hear what she had to say 17 short years ago when it came to absentee ballots and purging voter rolls. Go.
As the Supreme Court noted, no right is more precious in a free country than that of having a voice in the election of those who make the laws under which, as good citizens, we must live.
No, I don't necessarily disagree that that's important, but the greatest right we have is the right to life. Go ahead.
Other rights, even the most basic, are illusory if the right to vote is undermined. I repeat, other rights, even the most basic, are illusory if the right to vote is undermined. The principle of one person, one vote is sacred in our country, and we must do everything to uphold it. Yet more than 225 years since our founding...
Even back then, she didn't know how to read a speech that was handed to her. Go ahead.
There are still legitimate concerns over the integrity of our elections and of ensuring the principle of one person, one vote, that every person has access to voting and that every vote will be counted. 20 years ago, I was chair of the California Democratic Party. It was our function, it was our purpose to remove obstacles of participation to voting. The greater responsibility, of course, was with the Secretary of State in our state and in states across the country who controlled the elections in the state. But we all, in all of our capacities, had a responsibility to remove, not throw up, obstacles to participation. I know that this issue is not just about counting votes, but what happens in all three phases, before, during, and after the election. And in all three phases, there were problems in this election in Ohio and elsewhere.
So she's doubting the 2004 election results of George W. Bush. It wasn't even that close. But they keep focusing on Ohio, that the vote in Ohio wasn't right. It wasn't right. They always challenge Republican victories in the presidential elections. They always have. And then they pretend January 6th was the greatest threat. Go ahead.
Before the election, there were complaints about absentee ballots that were requested but did not arrive. There were reports of registration problems and of improper purging of the voting rolls. And the Ohio Secretary of State made decisions about provisional ballots, partisan poll watchers, and paper requirements for registration forms that some found questionable.
Wow. Wow. Voter fraud, she's saying. Fraud by the Republican Party. She must be a kook. I wonder what Chris Christie said back then. Nothing. Probably said, pass the meatballs. You know, and all the others on TV, I'm sure they were very upset with the minority leader back then, Nancy Pelosi, complaining about the results of the election in 2005. Go ahead.
To widespread confusion and possible disenfranchisement. Disenfranchisement.
Disenfranchisement. Say it 10 times fast, Nancy. So she was very concerned about the voting processes back then, particularly when it comes to Ohio, a key state that Bush won fairly easily. And they're always concerned about it. They want to expand the vote. So when they win, it's fine. When they lose, it's not. It's that simple. And when they lose, they try and destroy a president, as they did with Trump. Nobody's trying to destroy Biden. Biden's he's destroying himself. Should never have been president just because of his mental capacity alone. So there is that. So I just wanted to point that out. It's like the tape that people bring out from, I think it was 2005 as well. Chuck Schumer on the filibuster. This will be a disaster. This will be doomsday to democracy. Goes on and on. And now it's righteous. It's righteous. And of course, the media just put up with this crap day in and day out. Not put up with it, but they promote it. And of course, we have exactly that going on. We have MSNBC, this show called The Readout. Joy Reid, who is joyless, as are most people named Joy. Not all. If you're watching, not you. And Joy Reid apparently is going to be removed from her slot at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on MSNBC sometime in March. That's what's been put out there in social media. I'm not sure. I've been wondering how long Comcast will have such a bigot, racist hack as her. Doesn't mean they'll get rid of her altogether. They may give her a show. You know, maybe she'll be the lead into Al Sharpton. I don't know, but time will tell. But she is a disaster. She is. And of course, I've been on this little mini campaign to get rid of her. Mark, don't you believe in the First Amendment? This has nothing to do with the First Amendment. Do I work for the government? Is Comcast part of the government? No. So this is not a First Amendment issue. And trust me, if I did 0.1% of what she did, I'd be boycotted. They want to remove me, this, that, and the other. But she's so hateful. And she despises this country, which is remarkable when you consider her father came from the Congo and her mother from Guyana, South America, that they were a naturalized citizen, and she's a born citizen in this country. How new her family is to this country, her hate for it is unbelievable. It reminds me of Omar. You know, way back when on it for immigration purposes, and not just Omar, reminds me of Talib. Her parents also, Palestinians. If you didn't have allegiance to the United States, you couldn't become a citizen. Now, if you get across the border, you can become a citizen. But back then, there were strict requirements. They don't talk about that anymore. You not only, I'll give you another example. My rabbi, who's from Canada, just became a citizen yesterday. So excited. He had to study the test. He had to take the test. They were giving the test on Saturdays, and he's an Orthodox rabbi. And he said, that's the Shabbat. I can't take the test on Saturdays. And he'd keep telling them that. So finally they understood, and he took the test. And then they told him to come in on the following Saturday to be sworn in as a citizen. And he said, I can't come on Saturdays. So eventually he just showed up on a weekday, and they swore him in individually, which I guess would have been yesterday. So that's very exciting. He went through this process, the entire process. And again, you need to know American history. So now he probably knows more American history than any junior in any college or university in America. Certainly any host on MSNBC. But to come to this country, she winds up going to Harvard. She winds up in a multi-million-dollar job where she has 3 viewers. But the point is, she couldn't succeed in most other countries. She's not good enough. Because of her race, she personally is not good enough. And yet she does. And she succeeds by trashing the United States. It's unbelievable. I don't know, my parents loved this country. Their parents loved this country. And they were so happy that this country would let them in so that they could escape, the pogroms and so forth that were taking place in Russia. And for people to come here and talk about events that their families never experienced and just go on and on about how horrific America is, knowing how wonderful America is, it just drives me nuts. So here's LaTosha Brown on MSNBC on the Readout program the other day. Go.
President Biden is heading to Atlanta, Georgia tomorrow for a speech on voting rights legislation. Biden and Vice President Harris will make an urgent call for the passage of federal voting rights laws, specifically two bills.
These are not to pass federal voting rights laws. No, to pass into law laws that become federal laws. They're not federal laws that they're passing. And I would point one other thing out. This is a Democrat Party agenda. There's no bipartisanship whatsoever. This isn't about having more people vote legitimately. This is about the Democrat Party crushing Republican states, crushing all opposition, expanding their base, turning the whole country into California, and preventing Republican state legislatures from controlling elections in their states. Only Democrat state legislatures. A clear violation of the federal Constitution. I heard a caller, I was driving back from the airport yesterday, and thank you, United. I missed my radio show thanks to you. Somebody called in and said, I disagree with you, Richie. The guy's a liberal, and he says, I thought you argued that states should be able to make the rules when it comes to voting and so forth, and you have some issues with a state or a city like New York allowing illegal aliens to vote. How do you match those things? I thought to myself, what an idiot. How would you answer that? If a state passes a law and says only white people can vote, is that okay? If a state passes a law and says only people under 5'6" can vote, is that okay? If a state passes a law and says only Gentiles can vote, is that okay? If a state passes a law and says this, that, or the other, that's absolutely preposterous. Is that okay? Is that what the Constitution means? Of course not. The Constitution means that citizens are to be treated equally under the law. Equally under the law. If you're not a citizen, it doesn't matter. As a state, you can't pass a law that says illegal aliens can vote any more than you can say that the people in France have a right to vote in your elections. It doesn't work that way. On top of that, they think they're clever. They're diabolical, but they're not clever. What the Democrats want to do is really an attack at both ends. They want their cities and their states to pass laws like this that allow illegal aliens to vote. And they want that to be a constituent group and in a growing way. But at the same time, they want no voter ID for federal elections. No precinct requirements for federal elections. No ability to challenge somebody's quote-unquote right to vote in federal elections, which means illegal aliens will be voting. So you start at the city or state level, they can vote, and then you take all the protections away at the federal level, and then they're going to vote in federal elections. That's exactly what the plan is. You heard it here first. That's exactly what the plan is. Go.
Stalled by Senate Republican obstruction. Senate Democrats are expected to take up a bill by MLK Day to change Senate filibuster rules.
Now let's see. Does she go through a list of what's in this law? No. And they never will. I'm the one who does it. Over and over and over again. It would take them 30 seconds, 60-second tops to go on about what's in this bill because the American people would reject it. They would repudiate it. Even in Democrats' strongholds, when they say they don't want voter ID, Democrats support voter ID. Minorities support voter ID because they don't want their votes canceled either. They don't want some schlub coming in from wherever who's not registered to vote or is about to vote for the third time or comes from another country or is voting in the name of some dead person, canceling their vote. They don't want that either. Nobody does, because that takes your franchise away, except apparently the Democrats and this clown. Go ahead.
Currently opposed by two conservative Democrats who won't say what they actually will support. That's partly why some Georgia voting rights...
That's a lie. As a matter of fact, Manchin and Sinema support most of this voting bill. What they oppose is the filibuster, they say, which is what's needed for them to get this vote. That is to eliminate the filibuster and the 60 senator threshold. Manchin says he doesn't want to weaken the filibuster, and so does Sinema. But they both say they can support this bill, or certainly the vast majority of it. So she's lying about that. And number two, they're not conservatives. They're actually centrist leftists, centrist left of center, if you will, because they vote for everything else that the Democrats want. Go ahead.
White House to stay away unless they have a plan to get the legislation over the finish line. A joint statement signed by several groups noted Georgia voters made history and made their voices heard, overcoming obstacles, threats, and suppressive laws to deliver the White House and the U.S. Senate. In return, a visit has
overcoming obstacles, threats, and suppressive laws. Even back during the pandemic vote last year, what are they talking about? Overcoming obstacles, threats, and suppressive laws. There were no obstacles, threats, or suppressive laws. You know, as far as we've come, some people just want us to believe we're still in Jim Crow, Democrat Party Jim Crow. We're not. We're not. And where are all the lawsuits challenging the obstacles, threats, and the suppressive laws? There aren't any. Go ahead.
On them, requiring them to accept political platitudes and repetitious, bland promises. Such an empty gesture, without concrete action, without signs of real, tangible work, is unacceptable. And tonight, a coalition of groups who signed on to that statement, including Black Voters Matter, announced that they will be skipping President Biden's speech. And joining me now is LaTosha Brown, co-founder of Black Voters Matter. And LaTosha, my friend, this has been the subject of a lot of chit-chatter on Twitter. But these groups are not going to attend. And it's not just Black Voters Matter. New Georgia Project Action Fund won't be there. Asian American Advocacy Fund, the Galileo Impact Action Fund. These are groups that helped win the state in 2021 in that special election, and in 2020 aren't going to be there. Tell me why.
You know, it is not our goal to be combative or to be antagonistic. We are trying to send a message of how serious this is for us. That has been over a year. When we're looking at SB 202 and the kind of damage that it did in the state of Georgia, currently right now, many of the voters that supported and came out and voted in record numbers, we have less voting rights protection now than we did a year ago.
How so? How so? Go ahead.
And we're saying that is we're long past the time for just speeches. At this moment, what we want to see is we want to see a bill in hand. We want to see the bill signed. We want to, and we believe that there was a lot of goodwill. There was a lot of momentum that has been lost in the last year because the Democrats did not. We don't feel like this administration made.
Ooh, that's it. Because the Democrats, and then she moved on to another statement. Because it's not about voting reform or voting rights. It's about voting Democrat. She spit it out there by accident. That's the goal here. That's the entire goal here. To change the system to support the Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party, for all the talk, there's no fraud in 2020, including from Republicans. The fact of the matter is that's what they want, because this bill allows for massive, massive fraud. These legislatures are trying to put protections in place, which apparently is problematic. Let's move on to the other magnificent area of the country, California. We have this guy, Newsom. Newsom believes that that health care now should be provided to illegal aliens. So they open their borders. Illegal aliens get free education. They can get free health care for the most part. That's a fact. Go through the emergency room. There's one illegal alien patient at a hospital I know, and the word is that person's been there for 5 months with a heart problem. 5 months. Who pays for that? You pay for that. That's who pays for that. So we have Democrats who want illegal aliens to vote. We have Democrats who want illegal aliens to have the formal California health care plan. We have Democrats who want to give out driver's licenses to illegal aliens. In other words, dumb down the notion of citizenship, eliminate the idea of an illegal alien, and completely and utterly change the United States. No nation has ever survived this. No nation has ever survived without its own identity, without a culture. You can have a diversity without a culture. What's happening to this country is people are taking advantage of the beneficence, the tolerance, the diversity that exists in a free constitutional republic. So this needs to be rejected too, but this is the push by the Democrat Party. And as I said on this program, as I've said on radio, as I've said on my Fox show, this is the insurrection. The greatest enemy we face in this country, if we want to survive as a free republic, is the Democrat Party. I'll see you next time on Levin TV.